It's so cool because when we met, it's like I'm living my own life with God and like discovering this stuff, and it's been super amazing. And then I finally meet Jason. We start to hear each other's stories, and it's like it's almost exactly the same process that led to the exact same result. And so it's like the Lord is starting to put these pieces together. Hey, maybe we're onto something for other people. About we've surrendered. That was the thing. I think we accidentally did the process correctly because we surrendered. I was a Christian for 33 years and like deep into like Pentecostal, all the speaking in tongues, healing all sorts of stuff about healing, interpretation of dreams, like whatever wild stuff my whole life. And yet I was still like in charge. And it wasn't until I let it all go. I made this decision to be like, all right, God, my way is not good enough. I'm holding the reins. I'm going to freaking do it right. Whatever that means. I have no idea what that means. What's first? So it's an interesting data point for us is if we're teaching or helping other people is like, that is a huge key is sliding it all over there. Not saying it was all a waste.
To want it.
Yep. Yeah. And then we had made a decision internally of like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Some sort of fortitude, determination.
Somehow.
We have no idea where we're going, but we're not going the other way anymore.
Yeah.
And that led to internal discovery of all sorts of things. And then an eventual moment of God's love hitting our hearts and game over from there.
Yeah.
So I know it's true. I already knew it was true by myself. It was helpful to hear another person that experienced the same thing. So
head knowledge becoming heart knowledge.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with that. It's not paint by numbers, but there is got to be some sort of process to it that is accessible, that people can ask for and receive if they so desire. And in that light, while I don't have it all figured out, I do know that it was a deep yearning desire. Like I have to figure this out. I only have one life to live. Like,
yep.
I don't want to live half my adult life at that point. It'd be another 40 years. Or I'll be my age now, right? And like spend the next 20 years chasing my tail or something. That sounds stupid. So Lord, I believe you're there, but like teach me these deeper things. And that verse asking you if it's aligned with his will and heart, he'll give it to you. And I didn't even know I was acting and probably on those spiritual laws, but that's truth. He will give you whatever you ask for. Yeah. And I think the harder someone presses in, the more profound it is. You know, when you back it up with action, I don't even know if action's the right way to say it, but like deep conviction is when things move. I mean, I basically wasn't going to take a job. I wasn't going to move until I figured it out. Like I had to operate, I had to feed my small family at the time, but beyond the most basic decisions, I wasn't going to do anything until I figured it out. And not even stubborn, but just like determined. And that led to a lot of fruit.
I think you said it right, where it's like you get these revelations or somebody tells you their testimony. You're like, oh, that sounds cool. I want that too. All right, God, I want that. But then understanding that he almost always like invites you into a process. That's the thing that comes up against Americans a lot. It's like you just
microwave or whatever.
And then sticking to it when nobody's looking, working on it when nobody's looking. It's like, I really want this, God. What's next? And being willing to sit there in the tension of the patience, trusting that he's good, trusting that he has your best interest in mind. Meanwhile, the enemy's trying to take you off course any way that he can. Hey, let's try something else, get a different job, do this and that. Hey, God's not going to do it. You need to do it. Pick up the reins. That's coming at you this whole time. And maybe we were just fortunate in our personality or something to just have this like laser focus or fortitude of just like, no, I'm not doing it. I recognize this. So I recognize the stuff that's trying to knock me off. I'm not budging. I'm doing this. Several days of nothing happening and just whatever. And just have this some sort of grit that I'd never utilized in my life before. And then something starts to change and you're like, okay, I'm getting a little bit more free this week. Next week I'm a little bit more free. So I'm on the right track. Like there's some sort of not the huge tipping point, but there's some sort of like the Lord knows what he's doing. So it's like he gives you like and it's a carrot, but like in the right way of like you're on the right track. Yes, there's gonna be new challenges each week, but enough to you're on the right track. And eventually there is this monsoon of a change.
Mm-hmm. I feel like so much of my settledness dealt with a lot of adversity, and it was usually on the backside that the Lord would show me the testing, show me what happened. So I'd go through it, and then I would just be doing the best I knew how. And then it was on the backside, the Lord would be like, you see this, what I did here? You see this, what I did here? I was like, oh, okay. But it was the bedrock of that beingness, that knowledge, that settledness, that guided me through the process. Because there was plenty of testing, there was plenty of fire and adversity on the backside of that experience. And that's like some of the biggest fruit, how he takes what's the metallurgy, how he tempers the steel. You create an amazing thing, but then you put it under heat and fire and see what it's really made out of. And that was the last 15 years, and it's a never ending process, but you do get to a certain point where it's like, okay, there's a certain, even if you think of sanctification and like 80-20, 80-20, 80-20, like he'll go through he'll work on your soul 80-20, 80%. Cool. You're going to get a lot of gains really fast. Cool. And he does it again, so on and so forth. You do that, I don't know what it is, 5-6 times. Now you're in the 99.9th percentile of purity. And it's different for every person, but it rhymes is what I always say. Different. Works on pride. He works on forgiveness. He works on whatever it is, anything that can hold you back from the fullness. And meanwhile, you got an assignment, what you're working on in the natural, which most people is a job of some sort or a business. And man, does he use that too. So I don't know, coming full circle on here is like, say doing exactly, both of ours started when we got some independence. We're working for ourselves, where we were making enough money to make ends meet. And then gobs of time to press in to the things of the Spirit without even having, that's necessarily what you would call it, or more just like burning curiosity. I'd use gobs of time and I'd feel terrible about it. Be like, what am I doing? I should be doing this, or this. And at some level I wasn't wrong, but it was like this desire just so outshone that. And I think I was making $33,000 a year at the time. It was enough to eat and live, and I just filled up the rest of the time with learning, pressing in.
That's cool.
How do we take the things we've learned from what the Lord's shown us and make it as accessible as possible? Because we know it's for everybody, but there's a process, and there's plenty before anything profound, and there's plenty after. So it's just like, how do we're starting off talking about it, and as we talk, we're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. It seems like that was part of the formula, if you want to call it. That's part of the thing, is there is no formula.
Right.
There is and there isn't. Like it's a living. The Holy Spirit is literally a living, breathing thing. So it's like he'll meet you where you're at, and you can glean something from this person, and this person, but it's going to be specific to you, So as a business person, I want to package it, process it. And there is some truthishness to that, but it's also very personal, very personal.
Yeah, we're working on, so we're thinking, we're working on the same type of thing, you and I are, in trying to package it in a way for people to understand. The best way the picture I've had is this highway. It's like the Holy Spirit's on this highway, and we're developing on-ramps for anybody, wherever they are, non-believer, lukewarm believer, kind of a believer, whatever you are. It's not like one is better than the other, but it's like however far you are along the process of becoming who God created you to be, there's always more.
Yeah.
And you can always come onto this highway. And then finding like the hot buttons or the disqualifiers that a lot of us come up with, or the enemy tries to get you with, which one of them at the very beginning would be like, I can't hear from God for myself. That's a massive one in like a huge amount of the body of Christ in a lot of different denominations. So they want to go and talk to the pastor who clearly hears from God, and we'll hear from the pastor and then go implement some stuff in our lives maybe. But hearing from God from ourselves, it's like, so you need to, there's some major initial things that you have to just believe. There's some step of faith, like whether you've ever heard from God from yourself or known it was him or whatever, you have to decide, God, this doesn't seem real to me, but from this person's testimony, for this Bible verse that I found, it says I can hear from you. It says I can talk to you. I want to. I'm going to believe I'm going to just believe it's true. Help me to actually like know it's true in my heart and through my experience. But until then, like, I'm just going to believe it and screw everybody else on what they think. And I'm just going to, how do you want to make this real in my life? I need to hear from you. None of this works if you don't hear from God. So it's like it's an identifier, because that's the enemy's right in there. Well, I don't know how to hear from God. I just never hear from God. I can never get any clarity. I'm always in this swirl. It's like, no shit. You're in a swirl. Like, that is what the enemy is very nervous about, you getting some sort of line of communication with the creator. So it's like, find some sort of grit, any sort of motivation it takes to like believe it, to put your foot down and be like, I'm going to wrestle with you, God, until this is real in my heart. Not so I'm white knuckling my belief anymore. So I've experienced the truth of it. And then it's true in your life. And then you can move forward from there.
Yeah, when you're talking about hearing from God too, what comes to mind is early on, I was profoundly hearing from God, and I don't even know if I would have described it as that. I knew it was profound. I knew it was inspired. I knew it was different. I knew lots of things. And it was all from getting really serious about this process. It was more real to me than I don't know, anything else. It was the most real thing I'd experienced, these types of things. But was I hearing from God? I mean, I don't even know if I had the audacity to say it now, looking back. It's like, that's actually part of what I'm working on right now, is when I'm in that inspired state, like literally picturing the Holy Spirit coming around me. And, he gave me a smart mind, but a lot of these things are insights are like, yeah, that's not, it's beyond my own capability. So being quicker, just be like, oh, wow, okay, that is from the Lord. And now what am I supposed to do with that? Take it faster and forward. But early on, I was having visions. I had all these experiences. I was not Pentecostal growing up. I was Baptist. So I didn't even have anyone who talked about that kind of thing. It just happened. And I write journals, and like, I should probably write this down because I don't want to forget. But it was just a pure intuition that I was doing that from. Like, it wasn't some rote process or any example that I had to follow. But you were saying earlier, I was like, we all have a relationship with our Creator. We all do. Agnostic, atheist, all the way to the most close Moses, whoever you want to picture. We all have a relationship with our Creator. The only question is how good it is. Mm-hmm. Our dad is available to talk to at any time about any subject in any way that you want to bring yourself authentically. He's there. And all you need to do, though, is expect when you hear back, when you come and you're like, I don't know what it is. I'm struggling with this. I'm wondering about that. When you get something back, like, wait, I heard this word. I saw this picture. Whatever it is, trust, write it down. Just write it down. You can always come back later and use your left brain, but use that right brain. Use that intuition to be like, capture what comes back, because more often than not, you can test the spirits. There's different things you do, but more often than not, when you review it, like a day later, 5 days later, a month later, you'll be like, huh, that's not how I would normally talk. That's not how I would normally think. Stepping in and trusting that. And that's when you start that two-way relationship, is when it just it grows and grows and grows from there. You build that relationship, just like a girlfriend, just like anybody. If you don't talk to them, the relationship's probably not that great. So just start anywhere. Hey, get up in the morning, whatever. I'm dealing with this in my marriage. I got this parenting thing. I got this thing at work. Or when you get into the higher levels of this is when you start off with prayer and thanksgiving. Like that is literally what it says, how to enter his gates. When you're coming from a place of gratitude, from a place of worship, that's what really accelerates like that two-way conversation. Like he's available for petitions and all that stuff. He loves you. He's a good dad. But when you come from a place of a full heart, it really greases the skids, so to speak. And then that's, I don't know, then it just kind of compounds on itself. Because like once you start to get an ounce, it's like, oh, I want more, I want more, I want more. And, being in the word guides you in truth. So, you don't have to read the Bible every day. It's not like a requirement. I've just found the more serious I got, the more that helped keep everything else on track. And I don't do it every day, just for the record. But I basically try to, but I don't harm myself if I don't. Often I'll listen to the Spirit. What's the most important? We got a big thing going on at work. Sometimes that's top priority for the day. But I just try to quickly come back from that. But it kind of, I don't know, it sounds, for a male falling in love, once you
taste and see.
Yeah. Once fall in love with another male or whatever, it sounds kind of weird. But once you fall in love with the process and how the Lord is faithful, and like you can ask him questions, he will give you answers, and then you will see the benefit. And he starts off with, I call them faith loops, like a tiny act of faith leads to a larger return and reward. But if you don't ever try or risk it, is the way you say oftentimes, then you won't see it. So it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. But yeah, he'll meet us wherever we're at, whatever condition we're in. And he's just a good dad that wants what's best for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, faith being the currency in heaven. So when I say risk, it's like you're stepping out in faith, because I'm going to go do something that logically I don't want to do and might not make sense logically. Yeah. But I'm going to do it anyways because I think I'm supposed to. Like that's literally a risk, and it's faith in action. So like whether you heard right or wrong, I think he honors that risk, because you're like, I'm trying something here. Yeah. I don't want to do it. And he's just, like, that's like the tension of the growth process, I would say.
Well, you just brought up the word faith, and the Lord recently has had me think about it in more specific terms. Is if faith is really, if we're talking about things of the Spirit and we're in the body is the easiest thing to see. This is the easy stuff. I got my five senses. I can see, here. The Spirit requires spiritual eyes and ears to hear, see, touch. It's actually more real than this is, because the Spirit's what leads to the natural. Faith is literally just stepping out and trusting the Spirit is real long enough to establish that feedback loop.
There you go.
It's believing in the reality of the Spirit. It was a more, faith, we use it a lot, but it's the reality of the Spirit, trusting it long enough to feel it. So it's just like a little, as we talk about Abraham, it was by faith he believed. It was credited him his righteousness by his faith in basically Jesus before he existed, like way before he existed. So it was trusting in the things of the Spirit before you could see them in the body. And then in that process, you make the spirit more real, and then you're pulling it down into the body. And as you get that feedback loop, then you want to spend more and more time in the spirit, pulling that stuff down into the body, because it's literally like,
it's better.
It's better. It's better. It's
but you
life.
don't. It doesn't feel real or better until you're experiencing it. And then once you do, it's like once you taste and see the reality of the spiritual life with God, you're like, now that I've tasted it, there's no going back for me now. I have tasted something that's different than what I've known.
Yeah.
So how do I experience more of that?
Yes. And when you're with all these things we talk about, when you're with the Lord in the third, I'm learning more of the technicalities, but you're basically in the third heaven. First heaven's here on earth, third heaven's with God, second heaven's in between with the enemy. It's a separate subject. But when you go there, you're literally there in the spirit. And so you're sensing things in the spirit. You're seeing things in the spirit. And then you're able to describe them from this body. So you write them down, you speak them, whatever it is. But it's revelation. It's insight, like literal insight into whatever. If you're an inventor, that's where like ideas come from, gadgets, gizmos that you can turn into money on this earth. You can turn into service, which turns into money. When we're reading the Bible and we're asking the Lord, like, give me insight. We're going in the spirit and we're learning something from that reality, and we're bringing it down. And it's very practical. Like, it should edify you, build you up immediately. Some, whatever it is, visions, revelation. I'm not a healer, like, but my understanding is like when Jesus is healing people, that's basically he's pulling from that reality. There's just different skill sets. I see more visions, and I hear things and write things down when I'm active in that. And then, they're true, they're accurate. You test them, you can test them. Business strategies, you name it, it's very applicable to whatever issue we're working on, but it does require this element of faith and testing and reps. And it's just like any muscle. You gotta start with something. You got a little dumbbell, start it and just keep building that strength. And before you know it, that's how we build up our spirit, man, is just through testing, trying, talking.
And another huge step is to surrender to God's way of exercising the spirit, man, like what to work on today or tomorrow. Because we might hear some cool story or hear somebody about healing or visions and just go after that. I want the healing, I want the visions, all this stuff. And you get kind of like pulled into like the highlight reel or the big.
Yeah.
Surrendering to his process, he's just way more efficient in what's best for you. And that might be several years or several months or several days of like an internal excavation of things he wants to point out, healing he wants to bring to you, different perspectives he wants to bring on situations that have happened in your life. He wants to like use your testimony, the things that you've been through, to like shape it into this like awesome, powerful weapon of the kingdom. But if we're all trying to grab the healing and grab all this other stuff, we're missing like this character development that he's trying to like do within us, so that our lives can actually be like scalable, and that our character can match the calling, like people say. So it's just super important to for any of the listeners, it's just breaking it down, because you can go down all these rabbit trails of any direction. But just to say, what do you want to work on in my heart, in my mind next? Just me and you, God. Not all these stories and stuff. It's like he might eventually lead you to that stuff, or that might be some of your adventures to take.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, it's I'm going to trust that you know what's best to work on. I'm going to trust that you know what's best for me next. So even because Pentecostal, I knew all about that stuff. I surrendered all the flashiness and all the excitement and all that other stuff. And I was just like, I don't care. I'm not putting it all over there. You didn't have that same experience, but you were just like, so it's the same idea though. I'm putting it all to the side and I'm saying, what do you want to work on? And then it's infinitely more efficient. Obviously, if he knows your design, he knows your web of trauma and wrong thinking. It's just let him untie the knots.
What makes you think about sports analogies? Like, I played football, so say you want to be the best football player ever. Well, a lot of people have to work through this. I think I did. If you believe your coach has your best interest in mind, they're the quickest way, and assuming they're competent. Mm-hmm. So there's an element of submission and competence required from the coach. But assuming you do that, then they're in the best position to tell you what you need to work on. For me, I was always good at legs, and it was harder for me to do arms. So if we were working out, I might have been on the squat rack all day because I could put up big numbers. But what a good coach would have said to me is, well, maybe we need to work on your arms, and maybe not even arms, but maybe like, some tiny muscle group that we need to work out and get that really strong. What does that show up in my ego and throwing up weight? Probably nothing. But when you submit to the process and step in faith to some degree that this coach, so to speak, has my best interest in mind, then you realize the counterintuitive ways. Like, if I want to be, ultimately, if the goal is the same, I want to be a world-class athlete or whatever it is, you're going to submit to that process, taking you into the tiny things, often the things that you desire the most to like gloss. So I don't want to work on abs. Those have always been hard for me. I don't like doing crunches or whatever it is. Oftentimes that's like, all right, let's just dive into it. Let's go in our spirit to the thing I want to deal with the least. Oftentimes you just be like, coach, thanks. I already know to get where I want to go, it's going to cost me something. Let's go where the cost is the highest, because that's generally where the highest ROI is. So when you get on that relationship, eventually you see enough. Instead of making the coach point out the hard thing, you start to know how the coach thinks, and you're like, coach, is this what we should work on today? It's like,
yeah. It's like, I know.
Because it's probably the thing that's like the least thing you want to do. And it could be the tiniest request. You're like, oh, this relationship from back then, you want me to do what? Say, apologize to their face for something I did from 25 years ago when I was like 7 years old? It couldn't be that. Oftentimes when you say that, exactly. It's like, no, it's that. And you're like, this seems so what difference could that make? Mm-hmm. But inside of us, like, there are these tiny things that mean humility, all kinds of fruit that must come up in us in order for us to even go down that path of thought process. And that's also like what I've discovered how he works in these areas. And then you'll do something like that and then find some weird freedom in some other area of life that you never would have ever connected those two things to each other. But he does. And so the more submit quicker, it's just you want to progress fast, then look for the higher pain point, look for the very counterintuitive ways, come in submission and just do them because it's what's best for you, even if you can't see it. But it's like any good coach. Like once you realize they love you and care for you, you just, okay, coach, what is it today? I'm not going to rebel. I'm not going to come up with my best plan. Just like, I'm going to bring the work ethic. I'm going to bring this, and you just lead me, guide me.
That's perfect. Holy Spirit is that's coach. That's like his identity would be coach. That's a perfect trainer. He knows what's best, and you learn to trust him. So it's like for listeners or whatever, it's like you might trust God as you might view him as like the really pissed off, angry coach that doesn't even know your name. You might view him like that. You might feel like a freshman and he's like the varsity coach. That however you feel towards him, just listen to what Jason is saying there. And it's like, you have the wrong view of God. You're going to have to step out in faith that he's different than you think. And then just come to him and say, all right, coach, what's today? And watch how God proves his character through these risks, through coming to him over and over again. You'll start to see, wow, he's actually a little different than I thought. Eventually, trust is built, and he becomes the most trustworthy voice in your life. All the while, you're getting stronger for all these little tiny unseen things. because he knows how he created you. So he knows where he wants to bring you in the world. So there's all sorts of stuff he wants to work on today that you might not need for 8 years, but it's like you're trusting the coach.
Yeah.
So that was really good. I
Yeah.
like that.
And it's easy to say, but opening up your spiritual heart and eyes and ears to receive, he truly loves us. He truly wants what's best for us. And he's available any day, all day long. With my experience, it's like, man, this is profound. I know I'm coming down on a profound experience. Like, come back anytime. There's a river of life that flows from his throne. So when we go to visit, like, we're basically bathing in that river of life. And it's why I can't not do worship music now. It's just like, hey, it's like a battery, man. I just need being on the earth takes energy. Being there receives energy. So worship music, however you connect with God, there's many different ways, being out in nature, going on walks, whatever it is. But we all need, it literally is life. It's like the source of all life, like our energy, even when we're sleeping, that's basically what we're doing, is we're recharging. So it gets very practical. Very practical, day by day stuff.
It gets super fun too, because it's like we all have our different versions of either the Father up in heaven as a grump, or Jesus in like this 1500s art where he's just some and like just very wimpy and kind of wimpy Jesus. And you come to know him as this playful, exciting, dynamic, or also like warrior, and just all the different shades and character of God, where it's building your confidence in how trustworthy this God is. So it just gets it's like he just, imagine if you're an adoptive father and you're adopting this kid who doesn't know you, and you're trying to show him that you're actually like legit and like love him like crazy and super genuine, but the kid doesn't believe you because he's been through a whole bunch of terrible stuff. And so you're trying to like come up with ways to reveal your heart and what you're really like to him. How fun. Like that's it. That's what he's doing. So he's trying to connect what he's really like to your heart. So it's just like, step in there, take a risk, and let him prove it to you.
He just loves us all. He loves us. I don't know, even just saying the words is so short of how profound his heart is for each and every one of us. But it's available to tap into anytime. He'll meet you exactly where you're at, whatever, especially with whatever you're struggling with, because that's usually where he's working. It's an invitation. Yeah.
And he loves to connect the dots, and he's like really fun, profound ways. Something that's coming to mind right now I just want to share is I've been working on some stuff lately, again, with the Jamie Winship stuff. He's talking about different names God calls you. So these are like differentiators. So our core foundation would be like a son of God, adopted in the family of God, or a daughter of God. But then these other, like, why are you on earth though? Like, what are you doing? How did I design you? So it's just a conversation I've been starting with God, and it ties into like these cool ways he connects dots. And one of these things that happened a few years ago to me at a retreat is I was talking to a friend who was really struggling in life or whatever, and I was just listening to him and kind of giving him a fresh perspective on some of his struggles. He's saying something like, "Oh yeah, you're kind of like a wellspring, like kind of like a wellspring of life." And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of neat." It didn't like connect to my heart, but I was like, "Oh, that's a nice compliment." And after the next session in the retreat, which is basically called like the new name, and it's like it's identifying the names that the world has given you, labels the world has put on you, things that you've taken on yourself, like your disappointment, or you're disqualified, you never measure up, you don't have enough. You identify that stuff, decide to like delete those, and then ask God what he calls you. What's your names for me? And so that session happens in the retreat, and then there's like a 45-minute like mandatory silence with God. So you get to walk around the camp, and it's just beautiful, and you're just kind of wandering around, just starting a new conversation with God of like, what is there like names you call me? Is like identifier? Like, what do you call me? And so I'm wandering around, I don't know, 30 some minutes. It's getting dark out, and this camp is huge, and they've got all these little cabins and huts. And so I wander up to this one that I hadn't seen yet. And there's like a little light over they all have little names for the cabins. And I look up, and the name of the cabin is Wellspring. And I almost like hit the ground. It just gets me so. It's just so near to God. Like
It's
just
the first time, it's okay, that's cool. When he confirms it.
It gets it on the radar. And then it's just, can you imagine him up there? He just loves this little discovery process because it gets him on my radar, and then he connects it to my heart. So when anybody asks me like what would God, anybody ever asks me what God calls me, the first name that comes to mind is Wellspring. Wow. And it's like, if you actually believe that God calls you something, like he's up there in heaven calling you that, like how much confidence and nearness and fulfillment comes from knowing what he calls you. And then he'll bring throughout time, you can get other ones that I've gotten like a little bit like intercessor, Gideon, or joy, or like these other ones that are like helpful identifiers.
Yeah.
And then there's certain ones that are just like
personal.
Wham.
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage people that God does call you something. He created you specifically to become who you created to be. He wants to tell you what he calls you.
Yeah.
And build the confidence within you. He already knows you're that. He wants you to learn what it is so that you can grow in the confidence and then bring who you are to the world, because that is your gift to the world. Bringing who you are to the world is your gift to the world. So it's on us to partner with him and discover who we are.
And I feel like I call them table stakes identities. Like you were saying, if you get married, it's husband. If you, whatever it is, there's things we often all do. It's the areas where we're uniquely gifted and equipped, where we truly come alive and are differentiated. That's what you're getting at. Is if we have children, we're called to be good husbands, our fathers. If we're married, we're called to be good husbands. But there's something God made in us that is completely different from everyone else, and that's the uniqueness. That's where these labels come from. There's just something in your heart that you have to offer the world, and that's just the joy to discover that. It's a revealing process. If we live over 100 years, which is apparently what our bodies are designed to live, even though we don't fully achieve that right now, but I'm trusting we will sooner than later. Decade by decade, like it's like a flower just like blooming. It's like you don't know exactly what color it's going to be and how many petals and all this, but like that's like I think how the Father sees our life is just this blossoming, beautiful thing. And if you've ever been in a beautiful flower patch, I mean, there's just so many different kinds of creativity, beauty, and that's I don't know the analogy that's come to mind. Just a bouquet of all these different, this explosion of creativity and uniqueness. That's I don't know. I want to say cacophony of humanity is just like, or even not cacophony, but like the symphony of this beauty all blossoming together is part of how the Father sees us. And when we see how we are, not in a comparison, but just how we're different, that's speaking to the beauty that God created uniquely for each of us.
That's good. And one last thing on that, it's just the more reps you get with God, the more relational equity you build up with him, the more trust you have with him, the more like things that have happened with him, like this week or last week, like real stuff that's really happened recently. It builds up just like any relationship that you spend a lot of time, like you and I have been spending more time together lately. So we like naturally care about each other more than we did 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea with God. And at least how I found it in my life is, as my relationship with God has deepened, I care about him more because I've spent more time with him. I've experienced more of life with him. So now it becomes more and more important to me. So then when it comes to like sin and like these other like things that used to tempt me or distract me, they can't like they have less and less of a chance at like coming against this thing that's so near and dear to me.
Yeah.
It was this big, how near and dear it was, and now it's like this big. So, you know, sin will still try to get me at certain places, but it's like I value this way higher than my desire to drink too much, my desire to like get affirmation from whoever someday. This is more valuable now, only through process of growing in relationship with somebody, just like you would do on earth. So I just want to encourage people in that it's like, it's not, these aren't far-fetched things, but just talk to God about, I want to know you better. As you get to know him better, it will become more important to you. The other things of the world will like lose their appeal.
Trust in the process too.
Mm-hmm.
Like not needing wherever you think you're supposed to be, like letting God take you wherever you're supposed to be, meet you where you're at. He's
here right now, present moment. That's where we want to focus on.
Yeah.
The enemy wants you to keep thinking about the future or the past. And like pull. And God's saying, what, right here, right now, here we are. Forget about the sins I've done. Forget about where I'm not. And I'm right here though. Let's block all that out and say, God, I'm right here. What's next?